Okay, so hello everyone, I'm Natalie, one of the reggers. So the paper that I'm presenting is a paper from JCEM from last year, and it's a phase 3 study, and it's maintenance of acromegaly control in patients switching from injectables, somatostatin receptor ligands to oral octreotide. So the current guidance for management of acromegaly is that surgery is first line. However, we do have plenty of patients who require medical therapy, and that's either because they've got persistent disease after surgery, or in fact they've got incurable disease because of the nature of the pituitary tumor. And patients are treated with somatostatin receptor ligands, that's injectable lanreotide or octreotide. So this paper starts talking about this, saying that there are downsides to this type of therapy, mainly referring to the fact that it's an injection, saying that, you know, there's reports of patients having pain at the site of injection, scarring, nodular changes, and also the psychological burden of having to have injections. And they've also said that a lot of these patients require a healthcare setting for these injections to be administered. Or they feel kind of a wearing off effect towards the end of the dosing interval. So this study is a prospective multi-center randomized double-blind placebo-controlled study by a team in America and across 34 sites. So essentially, they started off with patients, who had confirmed acromegaly diagnosed, so that was on MRI and IGF-1 levels. And then they were patients who were on stable treatment with monotherapy with SRLs. So that was lanreotide or octreotide, and they had to be stable on that for at least 6 months. And then they had to have 3 months of biochemical controls. That was an IGF-1 level of less than 1.
And that's on the injections?
Yes, that's on the injection. So this was a screening process. So they did 2 screening kind of meetings with the patient to check they had stable disease on the injections.
Less than 1 times the upper limit of normal, rather than less than 1.
They've said
it must be less than,
less than 1. Oh, sorry, I didn't put the units. Less than 1.
less than 1.
In terms of
different units.
yeah.
Because we're around 30.
And there's no
sorry,
OGTT data.
Sorry.
There's no OGTT because you wouldn't. It says it's MRI and IGF-1.
Yeah, that's what I think.
I'm not sure. I need to check. And then once they identified those patients, they started a 36-week period where they randomized patients to either these oral octreotide capsules, which they call OOCs, or placebo.
So they were not given any treatment for 36 weeks if they were placebo.
That's right.
Okay.
And they started the treatment at the time. Yeah. So
it's only 3 months.
yeah. So and they started the treatment at the time that they would have been due their next dose.
Oh.
So they started the randomization at the time they were due their next injection, but they either moved them onto placebo tablets or this kind of oral tablet. And then the oral the tablets could be up titrated, although obviously it was blinded, according to sort of, they were monitoring obviously their growth hormone levels and IGF-1 levels.
How do you up to that? Doesn't make any sense. It's blind. Because up that placebo as well.
I need to check that.
Okay, that's a little bit odd, isn't it?
Yeah. And then there was this withdrawal. So there was this withdrawal criteria that they put in. So if at any point the patient had an IGF-1 level of over 1.3 on 2 assessments, or they had significant symptoms on 2 assessments, they put them back onto their SRL injectables.
That was the both groups.
For either group, yeah.
That's how we got that.
That's what they got around.
All right, yeah. The primary endpoint was looking at the proportion of patients who maintained their IGF-1 level at the end of the 36-week period. And then other outcomes they looked at was the change from baseline of the mean IGF-1 and mean growth hormone, and then the proportion of patients who maintained a growth hormone of less than 2.5. So these, here's the summary of the patient demographics in the two groups. So they were pretty well matched.
You see the IGF-1 is one times upper limit of normal rather than.
Oh, yeah, one, yeah.
Ah,
Yeah.
So it's not
okay,
a number one, it's this upper limit of normal.
understand, I missed
That's why
that
there's
part.
no units. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. So they screened 119 patients and then randomized 56 patients. 28 of them went on to placebo and 28 went on to be oral somatostatin. And then you can see the proportion of patients who had early treatment discontinuation. So the majority being because they failed treatment because they met that withdrawal criteria, and then adverse events in just 3 patients. I do need to look into that actually, because they did up titrate the oral octreotide, because they had the ability to up titrate the patient from 40, 60
So
to
it wasn't
80.
blinded then.
Couldn't have been, could it?
Yeah,
But is it called blind in the?
it is, yeah.
But you can up titrate the placebo by just giving them
More
2 more tablets.
Yeah, they up titrated, they must have up titrated. Well, it says that they up titrated, at the investigator's discretion, but in both groups, presumably, but yeah, so 19 had early treatment discontinuation in the placebo and 7 in the oral somatostatin. So move that.
How many was that? 50 or fewer in each group? How much?
56 total, 28 in each group.
19 out of 28.
Yeah, and they screened 119, but they didn't meet the criteria.
7 out of 28. Cool.
So the primary outcome was to look at the percentage of patients who maintained their biochemical control. So with regards to IGF-1 in the oral octreotide group, 58% versus 19 in the placebo group, and then with regards to growth hormone, that was less than 2. So they define that as less than 2.5 nanograms per milliliter. That was 77 versus 30.4 in the two groups. That was their primary outcome.
If a percentage of patients who achieved a certain level, 2.5.
So they started off with maintaining their IGF-1,
Yeah,
and it's the proportion of those patients who continued to maintain it towards the end,
right.
At what time point?
36 weeks. But bearing in mind, the patients who failed treatment, it says in the study that they used their last reading and put that in before they went back to injectables.
Okay.
Or they both were.
For both.
Yeah.
So if you go back here, it's at this stage,
That's why you've got some high growth in there.
yeah. And then they also looked at the mean IGF-1 levels and mean growth hormone levels at baseline and then at the end of treatment. So the IGF-1 was 0.8 and 0.97. So you said that, so that's related to the upper
Yeah.
limit of normal. And then placebo was 0.84 to 1.69. And then for growth hormone, it was 0.66 to 0.60. And for placebo, 0.90 to 2.57.
That's mean.
Mean.
Yeah.
We need to compare it with standard therapy, not just no therapy. don't we?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's an odd thing they've done. but-
Yes. And
Just go on prosthetics.
Well, yeah.
I don't know. And the thing that they presented this as kind of the main outcome, because I think this looks better than that, because actually only 58% of patients maintained control from injectables onto oral.
I mean, I think remember it's a peptide. it's remarkable they've looked at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what's the pharmacology?
That's
Yeah, so they said, I can read what it is, 'cause they didn't really go into it that much, but it says they have transient permeability enhancer formulation, enteric coated, filled with an oily octreotide suspension. The enteric coating facilitates the capsule to remain intact in the stomach until it enters the small intestine.
And so whenever you ask them in like endo, when there was endo, they always talk about this trans permeability enhancement. What does it actually mean?
I don't know.
well, it works.
Yeah.
Super light.
How does it get across in the smaller how does
Stops
it
it being
absorb?
broken down by
Well, that's why the peptidase
and
not
peptidase and
not
then
destroying it.
it wraps it up in a bubble.
It might be a much
Dissolves
thinner
into the
dose.
membrane.
It might be a big.
Yeah, it does say that they kind of up titrated because I need to look at that with the blinded.
80 milligrams.
A lot of the patients ended up going up to 80, which is fine, but
But then essentially they're all insulin.
Hang on, is that daily?
yes,
80 milligrams.
it's a daily tablet. Yeah, yeah.
Because the iron injection is 30 milligrams monthly.
yeah,
So it's an enormous dose.
Yeah.
A small proportion is absorbed.
yeah.
Yeah.
In terms of safety, they said that the side effects that were more common in the oral tablet rather than placebo were diarrhea, nausea, and dyspepsia. But they state that this was mild to moderate in intensity. So I suppose my thoughts on reading this were, obviously it's a small patient number, and they started off with patients who were well controlled on injectables to begin with. Another thing that they talked about was that in the patients who reverted back to injections having failed on the tablets, they were able to get their IGF-1 or growth hormone back under control within 4 weeks. So they've talked about whether these kind of tablets could have a role in patients who struggle with injections, and actually if they did fail treatment, you could quite safely get them back under control within 4 weeks.
Yeah. I mean, do you think what's the future? The future is I mean, you know, injections are injections. Do you think you'll go back to these? I mean, I can remember when octreotide was daily, was 3 times daily injections, and then this new one
Once a month seems quite a good deal. to
It
me.
does seem quite good.
12 times a year.
Yeah, so
And this is just once a day.
Compared to
Once a
tablets,
day,
I
yeah,
suppose- I
yeah,
suppose it hospitalizes, it medicalizes you, though, doesn't it?
yeah.
It does. Although lanreotide also shows that it's injected by patients. I know they said some of them need to come hospital, but the auto gel is,
They can do.
I think they will tell you they can inject themselves.
Yeah,
It's quite sizable. Isn't that right, Becky? Auto gel? The patients inject themselves, don't they? They don't need to come to hospital.
Themselves and their partner.
We were just
well,
asking, yes.
I just sort of assumed because it would be, I mean, they only managed to keep just over half of patients controlled on the tablet, so I don't know, I mean, that would be better. Because comparing to placebo, it's like, obviously, it's, yeah.
I mean, everyone who wasn't on
So it's on the chat,
gradually-
let's get that chat button. Because I don't know if it's. Did they hear us? Oh, someone sent a link.
Shall I click on this?
What's the front? Audit.
Oh gosh.
Are you speaking to us, Mordred?
Audit, it's a microphone, is it?
Is the sound on? Oh, hang on.
Sorry, I'm trying to eat my lunch.
Oh, okay.
So Peter Trainor's just been appointed as, presumably in his retirement, as Director of Crinetics to develop so they've got non-peptide oral, so basically what they do is develop non-peptide ligands that will bind to otherwise peptide kind of ligands. So somatostatin they've got in phase 3, and I think he's joined them to take that forward. And the reason I know about it is because they're developing an oral ceptin analog as well. So I think those will be the future. They're not peptide compounds, they're ligands that they've developed which are oral and will bind to the receptor.
Yeah, but this study was actually delivering the actual peptides.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is using the peptide and then using, kind of stuff to basically stop it breaking down, whereas the compounds they're developing are non-peptide. This is pretty exciting.
What, what are they?
Well, they'll be non-peptide agonists, won't they? They'll be.
Yeah.
What are they made out of? That's what I'm asking.
So what they do is they test thousands of compounds that bind to the receptor. And they're specifically specifically interested in rare endocrine conditions. So they'll be coming out with a whole range of things. They've got a somatostatin 5 receptor for congenital hyperinsulinism. It's in the link. It's quite interesting.
So in 2015, Melman published exactly the same thing, saying oral octreotide, phase 3 clinical trials, 60 to 80% responded, IGF-1 less than 1.3. So that was normal. How is it? Did they reference that? If you look at Melman 2015.
No.
Yeah, what
This is the drug company.
So it's 2015. Now in 2021, it's
We
a
haven't-
very similar thing.
This paper is funded by the drug company.
Yeah.
So I've got the Melman paper here, 2015.
Yeah.
It says of the 151 subjects initiating the oral octreotide, 65% maintained response, which was
And is
IGF-1 of less than 1.3 upper limit of normal.
Okay,
That's
and the
similar to
control
this
group.
there.
Is Melman one of the authors of this paper?
What's the surname?
Shlomo Melman.
Shalom.
No.
Yeah. He's on the paper, he's last author.
Where is he? Oh, yeah, sorry, yeah,
Ah.
yes.
They've
See-
basically got the big wigs all on the paper.
Yes.
You've got Peter Traynor, you've got Shlomo's last author, Mark Molich, but it's actually funded by the drug company. They're probably just advisors.
Yes, it's a 34 site. Yeah, it's a model.
So in the other paper, they switched it to 40 milligrams and then escalated 60, then 80. Sounds very
They did
similar.
that, they did that here as well, yeah.
It's the same people.
So why you're quite right.
So what's the-
This is 5 years ago.
2015,
Oh.
April 2015.
What's the drug
Safety
company?
and efficacy of oral octreotide.
Is this a phase 3?
Yeah.
Okay, well, there you go.
You just want to get it to market.
Yeah. Well,
Natalie, can I just ask a question? You may have covered it about what's the side effect comparison between oral octreotide versus IM octreotide?
Said that, well, they've kind of said that the side effect profile was very similar and issues with gallstones, there wasn't anything worse.
it was just worse, wasn't it? It was
Yeah,
worse,
it was more kind of,
more value.
So it was worse. So if someone has side effects on one, I'm trying to get a feel for if someone has side effects on one, is there a benefit of switching to the other?
The problem is.
no, I think they said they were similar.
We
Let me
haven't
check.
compared it.
They didn't compare them.
No, they,
It's worse than a placebo, is all you can say. But what they
But
need
that's
to
all
do
good.
now is a proper study where you compare the injection blinded against the tablets
yeah.
and have placebo tablet and placebo injection. I mean, that's what they need to do.
We probably think it'll work a bit, but not in everything.
It doesn't look as good, does it? It looks less good. They're getting much higher doses. It's
But
every
this
day.
isn't actually what they want to market in the pen, isn't it the ligand?
Well, that's what Ward did. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, because they
And
haven't,
this is a different company.
Oh, okay.
they haven't compared the injectables side effects with it's just against placebo. So.
And in the paper that Amir is talking about, is that the same thing again?
So the title of that paper was 2015 was Safety and Efficacy of Oral Octreotide in Acromegaly, a phase 3 trial by Melmed, concluding that oral octreotide
It
achieves
wasn't a direct comparison again.
No, it's not. They didn't
It's a
compare.
bit suspicious when they haven't done a direct comparison.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's very unsatisfactory.
Okay, so maybe this is the control arm here that is different, the placebo.
So they no placebo. This is a better study.
What did they compare it with? Injectables?
I don't know.
So subjects switched to 40, 60, 80 IGF-1, subsequent fixed doses were maintained at 7 months.
Oh,
Doesn't look-
there's
this one did not have a,
Oh, they
There's
didn't
no
do any
placebo.
placebo. It was just
Yeah.
from one to
Yeah.
one.
Okay.
Okay.
And if you want evidence, you need a control group. That,
Yeah.
this is a look
Yes,
see.
But the control group should really be staying on
Unfortunately.
the injectables.
Well, they obviously knew they were not as good, didn't they?
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I thought.
Were there more
Yeah, we get that a lot in the bone field as well, where, for example, they compare romosozumab to, oral alendronate. It's like, that's not the comparison we want. We want romosozumab against teriparatide or something. It's like comparing angiogram versus aspirin,
So the problem is, of course, if you're a drug company, you need to find a difference, otherwise your share price crashes. So if you do research done by drug companies, you don't get the problem.
Yeah, but the other thing is they just need this will be what they need for licensing. They don't need to show it's better. They need to show it's not inferior.
Yes.
Mm.
Yeah.
And so the study that you want to see, why the hell would they do that and pay for it if it's just going to show non-inferiority against the comparator?
Yeah.
So you're much safer to do this study, which shows that it's non-inferior. You get your license, and then people will start using it.
But can they say it's non-inferior if it's not head-to-head?
Yeah, well, you can say it's, or you can say it's efficacious. That's all the FDA need and the agencies. The last thing you do as a director of any drug company is do a head-to-head, which everybody's using, because if you show it's even minor, reduction in efficacy, everybody will carry on doing what they're doing.
Yes, that's exactly right. It needs to be better.
Point of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's why it's not.
But we can see it's not as good as injections.
The point of it is to see if
Yeah.
you know, from
So
a
where
patient
is it in that?
perspective.
But you see, what you're always trying to get a license, and then there'll be some patients say, "Oh, I'd like a tablet. I don't want this injection." I don't see that.
Well, I suppose in someone who's got comorbidities and
Yeah.
you're not, it's not a 20-year-old in front of you, you're thinking, maybe you say, well, if I can hold the IGF-1 and growth hormone a bit, it's better than them
Yeah.
being completely uncontrolled,
Yes.
or it's not that severe. So I suppose
Yeah.
there may be a group that you could use it.
Yes.
And these people refusing injections, it's really, in the American minds, it's very strange to tell people who've got uncontrolled acromegaly.
No, there won't be many. There'll be many. There'll be a small number.
But there are people whose IGF-1's got a 1.3, just around that, say,
Yeah.
it's not
Yeah.
pure, and we say, oh, big start Burger or something, and we think about it.
Yeah.
And
Well,
maybe
actually,
that-
yes, there are people like that.
So-
aren't there?
so
But do you
this
ever
is
say placebo, I'm gonna do nothing? You don't say I'm gonna do
You
nothing.
might do if they've got comorbidities and you think,
It's
well,
the-
actually, they've got not many, you
So
might
is
if
this
it's not
that
very
group,
mild,
it is the group that you
but
are,
I mean,
No,
what's the
No.
inclusion criteria?
it's not. It's not.
I'm trying to scratch around,
Yes.
I'm not saying it's my first thought.
They're implying that the the burden of the injections is really bad, but I don't know if
It's not.
it's true.
I
or
remember the
they're
burden
just
of
saying
injections.
You
When it
know,
was
in
in-
terms of the
Yeah.
psychology, the fear of it, or the pain of it. or
Well,
the
they haven't,
inconvenience.
they've just
It's
stated that.
introduction.
Yeah,
Injections are bad.
yeah,
Method, we try something else. Results, it kind
This
of
is
works.
36 weeks,
Yes.
yes?
yeah.
So 9 months of keeping somebody in uncontrolled
No,
acromegaly.
they came out.
When they failed, they put
they
them back
failed,
onto
they came out,
something.
that's why
placebo
19
ones.
out
No,
of
the
28.
placebo.
Both.
If your IGF-1 went up too much, you got an
20,
injection.
19 out of the 28 came out of
They
the
withdrew.
study.
So
Because
that's
they
what they got
failed.
to ethics.
So they were only allowed to say, so it was a bit bizarre.
Okay, so I think we know that we're not going to be using this much. Yeah.
How expensive is it?
It's not.
Is
yet.
it not licensed
It's not
yet?
got to stage 4.
We can just wait.
They'll have it the same price as injectable.
Yeah.
Because it's a big market. But I suspect if they're shown to be as efficacious, and you said to a patient on the first visit, would you like a daily tablet, like your statin that you're taking every day, or a monthly injectable? I think they'd all go for a daily tablet.
Yeah.
I think I would.
Yeah.
If you say it's not as good,
Yeah, well, that's different. But, that's why they're not going to do that study, unless they can show it's better.
Mm. Thank you, Natalie. That was really helpful, very clear, and good conclusion as well. Thank you.
thank you.
Okay.